All right. All right. All right. Aloha Friday Live, everybody. Nice to see you. We already have people chiming in, so let us know where you're signing in from. Let us know a little bit about you. Today we have a great show, and I am so fortunate to have Isabel Pollen with me, an actress. I'm just going to go through the whole thing. Performance under pressure coach, actress, experienced team facilitator, storytelling coach, communications, research, and script creator, among other things. And folks, it's going to be great because we're going to be talking about confidence and engaging your audience. This is one of those things that a lot of people have trouble with. For some reason or another, Isabel, we are not actors professionally, although we would love to see a lot of that it come out in our day to day because it would help engagement. I see Chris Ajala, my brother, already chiming in. Thank you, brother, for being with us. Isabel, this is long overdue. Thank you for being with me today and taking your evening because, hey, folks, she's in the UK, your evening to spend with me and talk about these things. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you, what you're up to.
Well, I just have to say those tunes are amazing, and I have to add them to my marathon playlist. So one of the main things that's happening in my life at the moment is I'm training for the London Marathon, and I'm running it for Children with Cancer UK, which is an amazing cause. They do extraordinary work around cancer research and supporting the families that go through these horrific times. So I have to add those sounds to my list, Enrique, because they are phenomenal, and I couldn't help but start grooving as soon as I heard them. Um, and a little bit about me. Okay, so I'll start where I am, which is in Twickenham, and I'm just southwest of London, and I live here with my partner and my almost 7-year-old daughter. My stepson is 18. He's now living with his dad, and my partner is an osteopath. And we have been living here for about 9 years. And we also have an American Cockapoo Teddy he's looking at me now and telling me to include him in the description. So that's me and where I'm from. I grew up in London. I studied at RADA, which is the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, which is really somewhere I never imagined I would be. And since then, I've been practicing as an actress for now 26 years. And about 13 years ago, I was aware that in between the acting jobs, because no matter how successful you are perceived to be as a performer, you're always going to have time out. You're always going to have the breaks in between the jobs. I mean, there are times where you will go from job to job, depending on your career trajectory, depending on lots of things. And I did have times where I went from job to job, but generally there were always gaps. And I was doing what a lot of actors do. I was picking up hospitality jobs. I was working in bars. I was working in hotels. I was doing temp work all around London, which was phenomenal actually for getting some people experience, because I was in and out of those offices all over the city. And I was invisible. The wonderful thing about being a temp, and I don't know if it's a role that's used so much now post-COVID. I guess there must be still some temps going in there, but certainly then I was able to go in and just soak up the environment of these places and saw and learnt many things. So I was doing respectable work in between my acting jobs, and I learnt a lot from them. I just felt like I wasn't really building anything alongside the acting that I felt inherently was giving something back. So around, as I said, 13 years ago, I thought, okay, what do I enjoy? Well, I enjoy people. I enjoy travel. I enjoy seeing people develop and grow. And I get enormous joy out of being a part of groups and teams. I'm one of 7. I'm the eldest of 7, in fact. I have 6 younger brothers and sisters. And so I grew up with a tribe, and being in a tribe is familiar to me because of it. So I then started to train as a facilitator. I worked with an organization in North London called Impact Factory, and I was very grateful to be there. I really cut my teeth there. I did a lot of travel with that group and learnt a hell of a lot with them as well. And then I started to work in other groups, and I was still acting, going back to acting jobs in between all of this. And then really just sort of organically, I suppose, for want of a better word, I started to develop my own work, and I was noticing that the skill set that I had as a performer, inherently voice and breath work, or at least breath being the beginning of everything, which is my belief that everything starts with our breath. So I found that I was inherently picking up signals and signs from people that that sort of approach to work in a more corporate setting as well was of value, and people really enjoyed the opportunity to practice and rehearse effectively. So I was excited about the segue of language between the performance and the real desire that people have to feel confident, and confident means different things to different people, right? So we all have a different interpretation of what confidence looks and feels like depending on the context of the situation. I also feel that confidence is very much about being comfortable and feeling safe, and psychological safety are two words that we're becoming more and more familiar with and more expectant of as well. So now I am working and have launched my own work for the past year and a half with teams and groups and individuals all over the world to enable them to use the data of the body. So I'm an accredited physical intelligence coach now as well. And physical intelligence is really the next dimension on from emotional intelligence, or maybe not the next dimension, but it's certainly it's the data of the body as opposed to focusing on emotions and how we notice those. It's more about how do we use our bodies to access the most comfortable version of ourselves, and I suppose as well that could link to authenticity, and certainly links to the other topic that we're here to talk about today, which is engaging our audience. And our audience can be anything from our team to an individual one-on-one conversation to 1,000 people at a conference. It again completely varies on individual need. So that's what I'm shaping today is that work. And my acting, well, I have my mum job as well. So she's almost 7, and these days aren't going to come back, and they're pretty magical. So I'm consciously choosing not to do theatre at the moment, because much as I'm addicted to it and it will always be my first love, for the first time I have something else I really want to give my attention to, and I am enjoying the autonomy with the work and the flexibility as a mother to be able to be with my daughter as well as do the work. So theatre will come back, but right now I'm really enjoying this. I think that's everything.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I tell you, the dynamics of life.
Mm-hmm.
Your passion is the art, right? Being in front of somebody, portraying a role, getting engrossed into that role and executing. All the while, you still have to work another job. And a lot of people don't understand that the acting world is not one that is too kind. And even when you make it in the limelight, you still have other things you have to do. It's not just that. So it's just amazing how you could take something like acting and playing a role and having that as your breadwinning type of activity. All the while, you still have a life. You still have to execute a mom. You talked about a marathon, and I want you to talk about that, because you post about your journey, these half marathons and these little events that help you to get to the ultimate goal, which is completing a marathon. So tell us how that secondary life, because it almost is to the work, that real life, the
Mm,
real Isabel.
mm.
How does that play out on a day to day? How did you get into the running thing? Because that's not something everybody wants to do. Right? Around me, there's not a lot of runners.
Oh wow. Well, you know what? My dad was a runner, is a runner, was a runner. He's 76 this year, and he always ran. As far as I can remember, he always ran. He didn't run so much when I was very small, but he went through a very tough time in his 40s, and running became his thing. That was his way of getting through it. And so I suppose by osmosis, I was seeing the effects of that. And as a person, I've always loved the outdoors. I've always found the outdoors to be a very healing place to be, and it makes me feel connected in a way that I don't really feel it anywhere else. So water and the outdoors are the two places where I feel very connected to I suppose that internal me that you were referring to earlier, the real Isabel. That's where I'm at my most content, and so running is the one thing that you can just have a pair of shoes and go. That's all you need. And I started doing it when I was at drama school, actually. So I didn't really. I mean, I did a little bit of running at school, but I didn't really. I didn't really get into the rhythm or the routine of committing to running and then actually starting to rely on it for mental health. So I talk about this a lot, that it's the mental health side of it for me that is huge. It clears my head in a way that nothing else does. Um, so yeah, around 19 I started doing it, and I got a little bit too extreme with it initially. That's my personality, I suppose. When I get into something, I'm in it, and it went a bit too far initially. So I had to
Mm.
then learn to rebalance. And I've been running ever since. And I've done, this is my fifth marathon. I've done four previous, so three London and one in Dublin. And I'm hoping to do New York in November, but that's yet to come. I've got to get around London first. But New York is definitely one of the top marathons I'd love to do. And over those 20 years, incredible journeys really with this process of running a marathon. And also I've always run it for charities. And so that message too is something that has become more important to me, or at least it's become more clear to me why that mattered so much, to have that purpose, to have that driving intrinsic motivation, not just the extrinsic, raising the money and all of that, but the intrinsic, the thing that gets you out of bed at 5 a.m. in the cold rain when you know you'd rather just curl up and not. And the thing right now, actually, that's really getting me through, because I'm at the toughest point of the training right now. I've got to do my longest training run yet. I'm doing on Monday. It's got to be 22 miles, and then it tapers back until the day itself, which is the 23rd of April. But it's given me so much. And last year, believe it or not, I also have such a gratitude barometer happening for me this year, because last year I couldn't run. I had long COVID. I had COVID very, very badly in December 2021, and it affected my heart. And so I had to stop all cardio for 6 months, which was the longest period of time. Even when I was pregnant, it doesn't feel the same, because you're growing a baby inside of you, so you feel like you're burning off things all the time, and your body's just changing. But with this, it was a forced overnight, almost guillotined out of my life, and that was really tough. And when those things happen, you have to find a way through. You have to find something else that creates that ability to process and to restart, which is what running does for me. So yeah, that's exactly really what it is for me. And also the community of people that I've met through it. There's an exceptional woman in this country called Sally Orange. Shout out to Sally, who has just completed 7 marathons in 168 days in 7 continents, and raised incredible awareness around mental health, and run it for 7 different charities. So it's incredible what the body can do if you give yourself permission to allow it. And yeah, that's really everything I have to say. I think maybe one thing that I'll add, because I've wanted to share this for a while, and I was going to post about it, but I'd much rather share it with you.
Woohoo.
Is so when I had long COVID, because it was very much related to my heart, and I had a very minor effusion, pericardial effusion, very, very minor, but enough to create a little bit of liquid around the heart, which is why I was told to stop any cardio. And during that time, I found myself, which is a familiar sign, particularly to those of us in the hospitality industry, right? When we see people that are in places of those really integral, important places of service, often I have seen this happen. And I found myself doing this gesture during the long COVID because I felt very protective of this area. And then I became more aware of it when I started running again last April and incrementally built up my ability to run. I became aware that I was much more focused on this area whilst I ran, and still am. And now what I've developed with my training runs is a sort of a tap here, a kind of, you've got this, without meaning to sound too cliche. Oops. But a sort of, a reassurance gesture, which has taken me by surprise. But I'd like to offer that as a way of tapping into that area in ourselves that we sometimes can neglect. And it's given me a real practice of self-compassion, which has been a very powerful process for me. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Matter of fact, it goes nicely with this part, folks. We are going to be talking about now confidence, engaging your audience. But you mentioned something while you was talking about running. You mentioned commitment and then relying on it. And you also mentioned curling up, right? You could do one of those two things, folks, when it comes to confidence. But this gesture that you just shared,
Mm-hmm.
what a way to connect with yourself instantly and say, you got this.
Mm-hmm.
You can do this. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And understand that you have the capability of doing whatever it is that you have purposed in your mind to do. Given the fact that you may need some tools sometimes, right? For running, you said, hey, as
Right.
long as you got some shoes, right? Now there's some people that run barefoot. Lord bless them. That's kind of gonna be hard on the body. But
Yeah.
as we're talking this thing confidence, right? And from your standpoint, a person on stage, a person in a place, that a person that is doing a movie, a reel, doing taping, all of these things, you get takes, right? And yeah, sometimes you like, hey, redo this. So and we have the opportunity now on a play, you got to do it. You don't have no choice. That's the when you got to perform.
Yeah.
But in the world of confidence, a lot of people are challenged in this battle of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
This 3-pound thing inside the skull can really get to us at times when you're talking about confidence. So how do you suggest someone just start to work with that piece? Because most battles are won and lost here in this, 3-inch area between two ears. Um, so how do we do that? I love the application of this, uh, you can create for yourself for this little room, this little area where you
Right.
can encourage even when maybe somebody isn't.
Right. Exactly. So I'll offer really what I believe to be the three tenets of confidence, because as I said at the beginning, I'm always very aware when I speak about confidence that it is a very individual experience, and it depends on a whole myriad of different contexts. And from the work that I've done with many different individuals at many different levels, in many different cultures, in organizations around the world, what I find the common thread through all of those humans is that there will be some situations where they feel completely confident, And there will be situations where it just drops. And it's all about awareness. It's all about self-awareness, as all this work is. And so some have more awareness of why that might be, and others don't. Why? Because they haven't practiced it. They haven't had the opportunity to step into a situation that demands a level of confidence. And so I do believe that some people inherently are more confident. Definitely, there's no question about that. What I'm very cautious about always is that you have to have humility with it. You have to keep checking that the spotlight may be on you in terms of where the attention is, but it can't stay on you too long, because the best performers. So one of my favorite quotes from a woman whose work I admire and always have and always will, and I've also very, very luckily been championed by her along the way, is Dame Judi Dench. And a quote from her is, "The best actors make other actors look good." And I think that's the same with confidence. When you're around somebody that is authentically confident, they will bring out the best in you. So I'll bring it back to the 3 tenets, because I could talk about this for hours and easily go off on a tangent. BPP is the acronym. It's nothing particularly memorable about that, but breath. The B stands for breath, because it all starts with that. And when we are feeling nervous, and nerves are good, by the way, they're just energy. It's knowing how to channel that energy that matters. But when we are feeling not confident, or whatever that version of not confident is for us, the first thing that happens is we can hold our breath, or we breathe in a very shallow way up here. And so the first practice that I give to people is the ability to know how to breathe in a way that physically supports what you need to do. And that's the place to start, is with our breath. And then the second is presence. So being confident is really about being present with people. And again, there can be a slight, in my experience, there can be a slight misperception or misconception of confidence being this, I know everything and I'm going to answer all the questions and look really slick and look really rehearsed. But if we think about the people that we love to watch speak, none of that's going on. And actually, we kind of love it, especially in this wonderful world of podcasts that we're in right now. You know, we love it when we hear the fluffs. We love it when we hear the kids in the background now and again, or the dog appearing, or whatever it might be. We love all that, because it shows that there's something very, very human about being able to show up and be present. Now, I'm not saying that content isn't important. I'm not saying that looking professional and feeling like you're really giving your attention to people isn't important. Of course it is. But confidence is really about presence, in my experience. And then the third one is the thing I've just alluded to before, which is practice. You know, anything else in life that we want to become practiced at, that we want to feel good about, or that we want to step into knowing that we are really giving ourselves the opportunity to do it well, we will practice it. And it's why I'm doing my training runs and have been since January. It's why I've built up those training runs, because I know that if I try and I know this is back to running and not confidence necessarily, but it's relevant, because you know, if you have a conference, so I'm working with an individual who I worked with today. He has a conference in June. He's very expert at what he does. He's at the top of his game, and yet he's feeling very, very nervous in not a helpful way, because he hasn't done a conference like this. Now, post-COVID, of course, these in-person opportunities have been much, much less. So I'm finding that people, again, at every level in business, unless they naturally have a way and had a way pre-COVID they're even more anxious about it because they haven't had the opportunity to practice. So breath, getting present, and practice are my three pillars really of how to create the feeling of being confident, because that's what it's about really, is feeling it.
Exactly. Now, folks that are listening, you know, and Isabel, you bring up or you brought up this point, which is valid. There are some people that are born with more confidence than others.
Mm-hmm.
Their personality drives them to it,
Yes.
right? Usually in like an ESTJ type outgoer, they're
Mm-hmm.
out there, they're leading teams. You don't have to tell them where to start. They pick a point and that's where they start.
Right.
That confidence almost comes naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But confidence sometimes is confused with arrogance.
Yeah.
And people do that. People confuse it and they're arrogant and they say, no, I'm just confident. No, no, you're arrogant. And you have to know and be present in that knowledge, right? That there's a difference. But there are some people that are naturally confident.
Mm-hmm.
They execute. It seems like a
Mm-hmm.
plaything for them.
Yes.
It's just like, how did you do that so easily? Well, I mean, I just did it, and you're like, oh my goodness, I was shaking my boots. You know,
Right.
it would drive me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a natural piece,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a way, like you mentioned, right? Breathe,
Mm-hmm.
be present, practice.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why they say practice makes perfect, although I'll never see a perfect thing. I'm guaranteed probably not to see a perfect thing, but what their meaning is that you can get to that place.
Yeah, I like to override that saying with practice makes the imperfect comfortable.
There you go.
You know, because we're never perfect,
Right.
not really, or at least our perception of perfection is going to be very different to uh, somebody else's. So
Right.
the only thing we can do when we get in front of people, which is the scenario that most of us think about, right? Whether it be in a meeting or here. I mean, it is very, very exciting in this hybrid world now to find a way for people to feel as confident here in front of a screen, looking straight at a camera. It couldn't be less natural. We are animals with eyes in the front of our head. And if another animal's staring at us, we're lunch. That's what our primal brain is
Yeah.
telling us, right? So, so it's no mistake that people feel great levels of anxiety. And when you throw, I hate the word hierarchy, but when you throw the sort of the dimensions of the workplace in some organizations more than others, if it's not a flat organization, then that adds another whole layer of what's expected of me and what's okay and what's not okay. So I want to pick up on something you said earlier, which is that it's the voice in our head that matters. And there's a wonderful blogger online called Kim Jones who has a fantastic one-liner that I use all the time. So thank you, Kim. That is, be careful how you talk to yourself because you're listening. And it's so true. So a lot of the practice that I talk about is about training ourselves to speak to ourselves in a way that is supportive and candid and supportive. So honest and supportive. And as a performer, I've had to continue to do that. I've done self-tapes, I don't know how many hundreds of self-tapes for auditions, and I have to do that with myself. I have no one else there. I mean, sometimes I do, but generally I don't. So I will do a take and then I'll watch it back, and I need to put on those different hats. And it's very, very similar when we look at the scenarios that we need to be confident in. We have to get practiced as well at dialing down the volume on the voice that goes, oh my God, look at my hair, or I hate the way I sound, or I should have said this, or, we are so good at giving ourselves a hard time. And that part of it is very important. And also there are tools, there are techniques, there are there's a lot of technical work that goes into being a performer, just as there's a lot of technical work that goes into being a musician or an acrobat. And when you see us on stage, that is the tip of the iceberg. So again, I think I hope the biggest takeaway for people tonight, or today, I should say, your time, is that you really have to understand what it is that you're really wanting to say. Why are you saying what you're saying? So, back to the likes of Simon Sinek and his work. And if we know why we're there, and we know why we are delivering the message we're delivering, then we are going to be much more connected to feeling like we have a right to be there, which is really what it's all about. And also that there's something very important about concentrating on how we make people feel. So I have to give a shout. Well, I don't have to, but I choose to give a shout out to a mutual friend of ours, Claude Silver, who talks about this all the time in terms of how we're making people feel. And we both love the work of Maya Angelou, and I'm sure a lot of people listening here will know her most famous quote, which is, "People won't remember what you said. People won't remember what you did. People will never forget how you made them feel." And I think it's really important to remember that we're in the business of feeling. We are emotional beings. And so when we come to present, or when we come to engage our audience, whatever that may look like to you, it is also about, what's the feeling I want to create here, rather than how many slides have I got, what's the content need to look and sound like. All of that matters. But really it's about, actually, how do I want the people in the room to feel about being in the room with me, but also about what I'm saying and doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's a question here. It was posed to me, but I like to tackle it both. It said, do you think the difference is confident people learn the value of silence, where arrogant people respond to everything? Now, my take on that, Paul, is that silence is learned by the wise. Has nothing to do with you being confident. You execute that as a confident person, but wisdom teaches you that silence is golden, and folly or foolishness allows you to talk too much. And so that's my take on it. I don't know if you have one, Isabel, to add to that.
It's a really interesting one, Paul, and I think it's for me, my experience of this work, and also as a performer, when I read a script, I love to see the pauses that are written in. Harold Pinter is a very famous British playwright, and he's very well known for what's called the Pinter pause, because he wrote his scripts almost like a manuscript, like a piece of music. And they really are charged. And also, we have to pay attention to what's not being said when we're looking at a character. There's a lot about Hamlet, who probably says the most out of most characters. There's even for him, there's stuff that we never hear him say. And the best actors are the ones that draw out what's not being said as well. So there's that take on it. In terms of silence, it takes practice to use silence. And it takes practice to, yes, exactly, Denzel, that's absolutely it. It takes practice to hold a silence for the other people in the room. And the bonus of that is that we also get to breathe and think and reframe what it is that we're doing. I mean, again, it's completely dependent on the context of what we're doing, but there is something really important about holding that silence. I come across it again and again with when people ask a question as a facilitator. If I ask a question in a room, if I say, has that landed for anyone here? Has that resonated? And if I don't hold that pause, if I then go, I mean, I'm most interested to hear about this, and we ruin the moment for people where they're really thinking about what we've said and they're coming up with their own answer. That's a facilitation example. But yeah, I think if we're responding to everything, then we're devaluing what's being asked. And if we have our attention in the right place, i.e., if we have our attention in the what's called the second circle of presence. So there's a woman called Patsy Rodenberg, who some of you might or might not know. She's an incredible voice coach. I had the great pleasure of working with her at the National Theatre many, many moons ago. She's now based in Portugal and works with people all over the globe. And she wrote a very wonderful book. She's written many wonderful books, but the book that I grew up with is The Right to Speak. And she talked, and another book called Presence. And from Presence, she talks about 3 circles of presence. So there's the first circle, which is when, for example, we're on the phone or we're thinking about something. So right now I'm in the first circle of presence because I'm reflecting on. So there's that circle, and I'm not really engaged here. And we all know when we're remote that people go into the first circle like that because, we have messages coming in. We get distracted very, very easily. Then there's the second circle of presence, which is the ideal place to be, which is here. And I'm the only person that I can see here now. So I have to be very careful that I use silence in between what I say. Otherwise, I'm saying too much, and I'm not letting you digest it. The third circle of presence is when we have all of our attention on what's happening over there, and we start to become too aware of it, and it starts to make us feel self-conscious as opposed to the self-awareness that we can practice in the second circle. So silence is key, and it takes practice to use it, because culturally as well, some people feel a lot more comfortable with silence. I don't know if anyone's ever been or is from Finland here. If there are any Finnish people on the call, they are very, very comfortable with silence. Now, I'm British, and anyone that has experienced the British people, much as I love British people, by the way, will know that we are not comfortable with silence. We're just not culturally. So, again, different people chime with different things. Silence matters, and pauses matter as well.
Absolutely. I've told this before, or I've spoken this before. The loudest sounds I've ever heard have been in silence.
Yeah, I love that.
Very impactful. And if you want to know what the world sounds like, just be quiet for a little bit, and you'll and you'll hear it. In the day to day, you have to.
Right.
It just gets all filtered in. So that's beautiful, folks. We've been talking about building confidence, how to get there, and now we're going to transition quickly because I know Isabel's on the clock here. Audience, our audience, that's our canvas, right? That's where we execute all of our greatness, and we get to collaborate, and we get to do things like this. There are a bunch of folks on LinkedIn. I see some people on YouTube, Facebook. So this is the audience. And so as a person that has been in the arts and can actually package something, which really is important, how to package something for delivery, how do you, or this audience, as individuals, as business people, entrepreneurs, folks that are on their own, how do they start to frame their mind to execute this engagement, because some of the audience is tough?
Right. I believe that we, first of all, and as you've mentioned, there's a whole range of people here. And so for the entrepreneurs out there, and I believe that we all have an entrepreneur in us. We all have an entrepreneurial spirit. For me, what entrepreneur means is that there's something about there's something about what you believe in that you wish and desire to communicate to the world. That's my definition of being an entrepreneur, and that can come in many, many different guises. So in order to get our message out to the world, we will come across a whole range of different audiences, and now more than ever. And the access to those audiences, I mean, it couldn't be a more exciting time to be alive in that respect. And what I always talk about in my work is what I've called, or come to call, the Tom Daly approach. Now I've stolen Tom Daly for this analogy, and I'm very grateful to Tom. And if he's listening, I hope he doesn't mind. Tom Daly, for those of you that don't know, but I'm sure you do, is a very talented, incredible young British diver. And obviously, our attention as an audience is on his dive. That's what we're there to see. That's what he's there to win the Olympic medals for. How Tom Daly trains and how he sleeps and how he's doing in his own life, with his nearest and dearest, with his coach, with his teammates, how he sits and waits on the day of that dive for that dive, how he then walks towards the diving board, how he walks up the steps and along that diving board. All of that is as important as the dive itself. And so this analogy really encompasses the need to start to explore who your audience are in ways that are less obvious. So, for example, when you have a remote delivery, because I think you're more likely to gauge your audience in person. Maybe, not always, but maybe you're more likely to be able to gauge that by meeting people or by knowing the people in the room. When you're remote and you can't see people, that can be very challenging. And what I circle back to is, what can you do before you get to that dive? And it can feel like a real dive for some people, depending on your level of, as Enrique mentioned earlier, that level of natural confidence, or that level of natural comfort, I prefer to call it, with that situation. Before you get to that moment of jumping off the board, what can you do to really establish that comfort for yourself? So really simple things like sleep, like nutrition, like, why am I here delivering the message I'm delivering? What's relevant to this audience? We call it the what's in it for them. What's in it for them? A lot of people start to talk from a place of what I know, what excites me, what engages me, and wonder why we switch off after 3 minutes, because it's not about you, it's about them. So again, it's back to that vision of, or that visual of, getting the spotlight off us and onto them as quickly as we can through questions. I could go into a whole set of tips with presenting right now, but I'm not going to, because we don't have time. But there are small things that we can do to get the audience's attention to where we need it to be. And be prepared to fail. That's the other piece of this. You know, a lot of my career as an actress has failed, and I have learnt. And what I mean by that is, I haven't got the job. About 85% of the jobs I've gone for, I haven't got. Maybe that's a slightly steep stat, but you know, you do have to get used to no. And there's no real reason why sometimes. And you have to be able to come back and go, okay, we're not going to please all of the people all of the time. It goes back to that self-talk and getting very curious. Curiosity is huge about why it didn't land for that audience. Not, oh, I didn't do this, it must be that, or they didn't like this. That spin that we go into. So get practiced at getting very curious about your audience and what is relevant to them on that day. You might have had a brief 2 weeks previously that would be different to the audience that you meet on that day. And with the tools that we've talked about, the breath and finding a way to be present with them, and the practice, giving yourself the chance to practice, all of that really ties back into our audience and how we can start to find out and explore and get a little bit playful with the engagement.
Absolutely. Now, folks, we have run out of time. I know that there are questions coming in. Isabel, you can take.
My daughter's being careful, so I can stay a little bit longer if the questions are wanting to be answered now.
Well, let me throw this one out. Chris, we'll connect either way, but he says advice for putting the silence into what we say to become natural and not forced, because sometimes that could be awkward. It's one of those awkward silence moments, like crickets. And tips for making it part of everyday speak.
That's a great question, Chris. Thank you. And I say it's a great question because it's so true. You have to feel like you can really do it in a way that feels comfortable for you, and everybody has a different comfort level with that. So I know I sound like a broken record, but I would say something that makes the silence feel comfortable is taking a breath as you do it. So, if I'm talking to you now and I ask you a question and I say, so Chris, how did you find this session? Did you find it useful? And I stay fixed in my expression and I'm holding my breath because I'm thinking, is Chris going to say something? That's when it starts, and my whole body's sort of like this. So I'm physically saying, say something, Chris, say something. But actually, you might be comfortable just thinking about the answer. So the first thing is, the tip I would give you, Chris, is take a breath. If you ask a question, and the pause usually happens after questions, right? Just take a breath as you do it. Just breathe in through the nose. And breathing in through the nose is a good tip because when we breathe through our nose, which is why a lot of breath practice like yoga and Pilates and all that sort of thing, is nasal breathing triggers what's called the vagus nerve, which I'm sure a lot of you here are familiar with. It's an incredible floating nerve that attaches to all sorts of wonderful parts of our body, including our gut and our heart, and it triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and restore system in our brain. So it basically tells the body that we're okay in a very simplistic way, that we're safe, that we're okay. So everyday speak, just practice taking the breath you need to. Take the breath you need to and see if it changes the pace of your speaking. That's it.
And definitely I have witnessed that in talking and presenting, doing shows. Those pauses are intended for you, and they are definitely intended for the audience. You have to give people space and the space needed. Now you also have to be conscious of too much space, and now you both feeling like something's wrong. But be aware. So that part of that presence is knowing those times and how those times correlate and how those pauses are being employed for the benefit of that exchange, especially when you are engaging audiences of different calibers, and by that mean it could be a cultural differences and all these other things that come when you have a mass of people getting together. The important thing is know your audience, right?
Yeah.
When you're going to go engage people, and I'm sure, Isabel, you weren't going to do a scary play for people who just came out of a trauma center, right? It's just you're just not going to do that.
Right. Having said that, I did do a tour of Pericles years and years ago with a company that worked a lot with homeless people, and we went into incredible refugee camps around London. And a lot of the material that we were performing were very resonant real life situations for some of those people. So it can be a powerful way. It can be a powerful medium. But you do have to be very aware, obviously, of the impact that it could have, and it has to be in a safe environment. But what I would also say is that we can't always know what our audience is going to do. We're not mind readers. So we have to be open to getting a different response than the one we hope for, right? You know, again, when I'm on stage, I had the great privilege just before COVID of playing an amazing part with Emma Rice directing, who is a phenomenal director. If there are any actors here and you ever get the chance to work with Emma Rice, do it. And it was a brief encounter, not brief encounters, no aliens. A very famous 1950s love story. It was live theatre, it was live music, it was live film. And it was the Haymarket Cinema that had been transformed into a theatre. And we could assume that the audience knew the film and that's why they'd come to the show, but some of them really didn't. And so we had to be very careful not to assume what our audience knew. And we had to be comfortable with getting a different response every single night. So the other thing is your audiences are always going to be different, always, because they're human beings and they've got a different frame of reference. So be careful of the trap of planning a talk based on the fact that this landed really well last week in Las Vegas, and then you're delivering it in New York and you get tumbleweed. So there's being comfortable with also not knowing, because we can't always know what we're going to get back. What we can do is be very certain about why we're there.
Absolutely. Isabel, thank you so much for taking your evening to share with us both how to build our confidence and also how to prepare ourselves for that engagement with our audience. Folks, I hope that you enjoyed tonight and you're ready for the weekend, because that's what's coming up next. Isabel, thank you so much. Aloha, mahalo to you. Aloha to everybody. Have an enjoyable weekend. Be safe. We'd like to see you again next week. And I'll tell you, there's nothing better than a weekend. So enjoy it, folks. We'll see each other again next Friday as we have another guest with us on Aloha Friday Live. Mahalo, everybody. Be blessed.